Welcome back, everybody. We're going to finish up this project that we've been kind of working on the last couple of weeks. And last week, if you recall, I talked about wanting to put on 2-piece borders to finish the interior of this quilt. And we're going to talk about both of those today. The outer border is real simple to do. I do this quite a bit when I've got extra fabric or I'm working with fat quarters and have extra pieces. What I do for that simple outer border is determine my size, and I use 3.5 for my cut size of those strips. Cut a bunch of 3.5-inch strip sections. It doesn't matter how long they are. I will actually take longer pieces and subcut them into a little bit smaller pieces. Basically, with 3.5 inches, I probably wouldn't make anything smaller than 2.5 inches, and I probably wouldn't use anything that's larger than about maybe 7.5 inches. That sounds like a pretty good number, and they're all different sizes in between. You simply stitch them one to the next. There's only one thing that I try to do when I'm building this kind of border on a project, and that's when I'm at the ends. I try to put a little bit longer pieces at the ends so that when I go to fit it onto the interior, I'm not making a cut and leaving just a little bit of fabric showing. So other than that, super simple. We do this in we have a number of our patterns that we've done this on. Sometimes it's an outer border, sometimes it's an inner border. Now, for the inner border on this, I've decided that I'm going to do a precision pieced border. And again, you remember, we're not working with a pattern. So I have to figure out the numbers. And this is how I go about doing that. The size of the block on the inside, that's set on point, is actually an 8-inch block. What I need to do is for simplicity's sake, what I choose to do is use a size square that's going to be an easy divisible number associated with 8 inches. So I chose 2-inch, and these are finished sizes, okay? This is 8-inch finished, these will be 2-inch finished, meaning that all those squares are then going to be cut at 2.5 inches. And, I wouldn't choose a number like 2.5 or 3 because 8 can't be easily divided by 2.5, and it can't easily be divided by 3. So that's the determining factor for what size squares I use. Now, once I know the size squares, the next question is, well, what size yellow squares do I need to cut so that when I cut them on the diagonals, I'm going to end up with 4 quarter square triangles that will be used and pieced together with the squares. And for that, I tend to use math, but we'll talk about both scenarios. The first thing I need to do is I need to know the diagonal measurement of one of these 2-inch squares. I do it with math. If I know the finished size of my square, 2 inches, and I multiply it by that magic number, 1.414, that's going to give me a number. It's going to give me a number that is 2.828. Now that's a really ugly number. The other way that you could do this instead of doing it with a calculator is to actually measure the distance there. You're going to find that it's hard to measure it precisely, so just round it up to 3 inches. But once you know that measurement, then what you would need to do for precision is to take that measurement, the finished diagonal measurement, and add 1.25 inches. That 1.25 inches is the number that you need to add so that you're going to have seam allowances on all 4 of the quarter square triangles. Now, that's a precision measurement. That's why I say or more. So when I took the number that I computed, 2.828, and I added 1.25, the number I came up with was just a little bit bigger than 4 inches. So because I've done this a good number of times in my quilting career, I took that and said, I can just use a 4.25 inch square that when I cut it on both diagonals, I'm going to have enough. But if this is new to you, if maybe you've never pieced on the diagonal or done a piece border like this, don't hesitate to go up that extra 1/4 inch. And that's going to give you a little bit more wiggle room in your process. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually be stitching a square together with 2 triangles. And the way that we do that is, or should be, very consistent. The first step I'm going to do is take 1 square, 1 triangle, and I'm going to line up the square edge, the 90-degree corner. And at this point, you need to make a decision. Are you going to stitch with the triangle on top, stitch this way, or are you going to flip it over, put the square on top, and stitch this way? I always stitch from the square corner toward the 45-degree point. Generally, I put the triangle on top because it's a little bit smaller. And so that's what I did with all of my pieces. I sewed them, chain piecing, one to the next, triangle on top, stitched them all. Once I got them all stitched, went to my iron, set the seams, and I pressed all my seams toward the triangles. Doesn't matter to me whether they're light or dark. This pressing scenario tends to be best for bulk and best for matching. And after I have these stitched, the next step in the process is going to be to create a unit that looks like this. And this unit is basically the same way. I'm taking the opposite corner. This was the corner that I sewed first. I'm going to the opposite, diagonally opposite corner, doing the same thing, lining up the 90 degrees and stitching one behind the next, behind the next, behind the next, until I have a row, and go to the iron, set the seams, give them a press the same way toward the triangles, so that I'm going to end up with a whole bunch of these diagonally pieced units, sections. Now you can see how we're going to build that border. And I might lay it out, I might not lay it out, but when you go to put them together, there's only one thing that has to match. The two seams that are here, and if you've pressed correctly, those seams are going to nest. You're going to stitch those two pieces together. Fold over the next two, stitch those two together. Now, how many do I need? Well, it comes back to knowing a little bit about the math. Each one of these squares, blocks, will need 4 small squares. So I've got 4 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4. That means I need 4 times 4, which is 16. So my side pieces, I'll need 16 squares to build the sides. For the top and bottom, I've got 3 blocks going across. So that means I need 12 squares, but I'm going to need 1 extra square for the top here and 1 extra square for the top of that border. So they have to have 14. So I'm going to work my way through building those pieces. They look, I usually, again, put them together into pairs and then go to put the pairs together. And what happens is things start to look really funny as you're building those blocks, but it's okay, or I'm sorry, as you're building those borders, but it's okay. This is the natural course of the process. What will happen is at the end of your row, you will have then a diagonal edge. And what we need is we need something on there. We need another triangle so that we can come back and square it up. And this is how you do that. I will take this and I'm going to look at the square corner of the square. I'm going to look at the square 90-degree corner of my triangle. And even though there's a piece that's in between them, I'm going to try to match those two edges. And when I do that and come back and stitch, I'm going to end up with something that looks like this. And that's exactly what I want. And that's what I'll use to finish off and straighten off my edge. I'll come back, measure 1/4 inch from there, and make my cut along there. But you'll notice in all this big long piece here, these edges are not always even. That's okay too, because I purposely put extra fabric in there so that I can come back with my tool or with my ruler, line up the 1/4 inch marks. And I don't try to do a whole long piece here. I usually do 2 or 3 at a time. Line up those 1/4 inch line on the tool and come back and make a trim. You're going to see I have very little extra built into mine, not very much. Maybe I should have gone up to that 4.5 inch size, but I'm okay. I still have enough. I'm going to have a nice straight edge so that when I go to put this together, I do have natural match points. If these play nicely with these number wise, 2 blocks down, that seam intersection will match that seam intersection. Now they don't touch, but they're going to be, these two are the same as this. And if I come down 1, 2, 3, 4, this seam intersection is going to be the same as this seam intersection. And I work my way down. And so that's how you build a precision pieced block or a precision pieced border to go on your finished inside quilt. Sorry about all that. And that's what my plan is for this week. I'm going to finish this thing up and show it to you next week, completely finished. And what else are we going to do next week? Don't know yet. We'll have to see how the week goes. But I hope you come back and join me. And I hope that all of this information is helping you to give you confidence to be able to build your own quilts without a pattern. You take care, everybody. See you next Thursday.